People always think the craziest bets happen in Vegas, but they're wrong. The most dangerous bets are made in rooms where fortunes and futures are thrown across a felt table like spare change, where the players don't gamble for money, they gamble for control. I wasn't supposed to be there. A single dad with a wallet full of medical bills, staring down a table of power brokers who'd never worked a 12-hour shift in their lives. But sometimes life deals you a hand you never saw coming, and you have to decide whether to fold or risk everything. And that's exactly when a billionaire CEO smirked across the table and said, "Beat me in poker, and I'll marry you." I've never been the kind of man who believes in fate, but if you're the kind who does, you'll want to stick around for this. Because by the end of this story, you'll understand why one reckless bet changed everything. And if you've ever believed that life gives ordinary people a shot at extraordinary moments, then hit that like button and subscribe, because what happened to me wasn't a fairy tale. It was a fight against odds stacked sky high. The night began like a cruel joke. Me, Marcus Thompson, a widowed paramedic barely holding life together with duct tape and overtime pay, walking through the gilded doors of the Sterling Tower Casino for a charity poker fundraiser I had no business attending. The suit I wore was borrowed, the entry pass was a last-minute favor from an old colleague, and every step I took on that marble floor felt like I was trespassing in a world designed to keep people like me out. But Maya needed surgery. Fast, and when you're staring down six-figure medical bills, you'll crash any party that might lead to a miracle. The air was thick with perfume, old money, and the kind of smugness only billionaires could perfect. I could feel the stares, the polite curiosity of people wondering who let the blue-collar guy pass the velvet ropes. But none of that mattered when I saw her. Victoria Sterling, CEO, philanthropist, and the kind of woman whose photo ends up on magazine covers under headlines like the Ice Queen of Wall Street. I knew her face, everyone did, but seeing her in person was different. She wasn't the distant figure from TV interviews. She was right there, poised at the final poker table like a queen surveying her court, every inch of her a contradiction. Sharp, elegant, untouchable, yet watching everything with hawk-like precision. I didn't expect her to notice me, much less invite me to sit at her table. But that's exactly what she did, beckoning with a slight nod, as if she'd been expecting me all along. The other players, hedge fund sharks, venture capital wolves, chuckled as I took the empty seat. "Feeling lucky, paramedic?" One of them sneered, and I smiled, because I wasn't here for luck. I was here because this was the only door left that hadn't slammed shut in my face. The game started, chips clacked, and cards danced in practiced hands. I held my ground, folding when I had to, playing safe, until Victoria spoke. "Let's raise the stakes, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice soft but carrying weight, like a challenge layered with something deeper. Her fingers tapped her chips, but her eyes locked on mine. "Beat me in poker," she smirked, "and I'll marry you." The table went dead silent. Laughter bubbled from one of the financiers, assuming it was a joke. But it wasn't. Victoria's gaze never wavered. She wasn't flirting. She was making an offer, and the terrifying part was, I could tell it wasn't random. She knew something. She knew me. I should have walked away, but when life hands you a wild card disguised as a lifeline, you don't fold. You lean in. "Deal?" I said, and with that, the cards were dealt again. Part of me wondered if this was her way of mocking me, the desperate single dad among titans of industry, but something in her eyes hinted at more. Like there was a story I hadn't been told, a secret that had waited years to play its hand. The first round was brutal. Victoria played with calculated aggression, pushing me to the edge with bluffs designed to test how far I'd go. I held my nerve, countering with discipline learned from years of saving lives in chaos. The second hand felt like a chess match. Every chip pushed forward a question, every card revealed an answer neither of us said aloud. Around us, the crowd watched with growing intrigue, sensing that this wasn't just a game anymore. It was a negotiation with stakes no one else understood. And as the dealer shuffled for the third hand, I realized this wasn't about poker at all. This was about Victoria Sterling, the untouchable CEO, finding a way to keep a promise she couldn't admit publicly. But why me? Why tonight? The final hand was dealt, and time slowed. The pot was overflowing, but it wasn't the money that mattered. It was the challenge in her smile, the unspoken urgency behind her bluff. I went all in, because I wasn't playing for pride. I was playing for Maya. And somehow, Victoria knew that. When the cards hit the table, I wasn't the only one who won that night. But at the time, I had no idea just how deep the game would go. The room didn't explode into applause when I flipped over the winning hand. It fell into a stunned, reverent silence, the kind you only hear in places where power shifts in real time. There it was, a flush of hearts, poetic and a little too perfect, sitting smugly on the felt while Victoria Sterling, Wall Street's ice queen, leaned back in her chair with the faintest curve of satisfaction on her lips. The other players, the ones who'd spent the last hour dismissing me as a charity case in a borrowed suit, looked like they'd just watched a magician pull a rabbit out of thin air and couldn't figure out where the trick had gone. But there was no trick. I had played the cards I was dealt, and somehow, for once in my life, the deck had been in my favor. Or maybe it hadn't been chance at all. Maybe the real game had started long before the first card was even shuffled. Victoria rose slowly, her tailored black dress moving like liquid silk, and extended her hand to me as if this had been the inevitable outcome from the moment I walked into her casino. "Congratulations, Mr. Thompson," she said, loud enough for the room to hear, but with an undertone meant only for me. "A deal's a deal." The murmurs in the crowd were a mix of amusement and disbelief. To them, this was a PR stunt, a dramatic whim from a billionaire used to controlling every room she entered. But to me, her words hit with the gravity of a man who had just unknowingly signed a contract with destiny. I shook her hand, firm and professional, but my mind was spiraling with 1,000 questions I couldn't ask. Why me? Why now? And what the hell did she mean by offering marriage like a poker chip? Victoria's assistant, a hawk-eyed woman named Evelyn, appeared at her side, already orchestrating the fallout. "Miss Sterling will arrange a press statement," she informed me without looking up from her phone. "But she would prefer to discuss the details with you privately first." Details? The word hung ominous and vague as Evelyn handed me a sleek black invitation card, embossed with the Sterling Foundation's insignia. "Penthouse suite. 1 hour." Then they were gone, Victoria gliding away through a sea of whispers, leaving me standing at the table with adrenaline in my veins and the suffocating realization that I had just stepped into a world where every move was calculated 10 steps ahead. I barely remembered how I got to that penthouse. The casino's gold and glass labyrinth blurred past me, but when those double doors opened, the sterile opulence of the suite felt less like a home and more like a negotiation chamber. Victoria was already waiting, seated by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass of scotch in one hand, and an expression that suggested she had just as many questions as I did. But hers came with answers she wasn't ready to share. "Do you know why I did that?" she asked without preamble, her tone cutting through the formalities like a scalpel. I told her the truth. "I don't have a damn clue." She smiled, not the corporate PR smile she'd worn downstairs, but something real, something almost vulnerable. 3 years ago, a nurse named Sarah Thompson sat beside my son's hospital bed for 6 weeks straight. She read to him. She held his hand when I couldn't. She stayed late every night because she said no child should ever feel alone while fighting to breathe. My breath caught. "Sarah, my Sarah." Victoria's words hit like a gut punch, every syllable peeling back layers of grief I had buried under debt and duty. "That woman changed my son's life, Mr. Thompson. And in the end, when there was nothing left to do but say goodbye, she made a promise to me. She said, 'If you ever see my husband or daughter fall, you pick them back up.'" Victoria's voice cracked, a fissure of emotion breaking through her practiced armor. For 3 years, I've been waiting for a way to keep that promise. The realization landed like a hammer. This wasn't a publicity stunt. This wasn't about marriage. This was about redemption. A debt she had carried from a promise made in a sterile hospital room, and a poker table had been the only stage big enough for her to offer what pride wouldn't let me ask for. "I couldn't hand you a check," she continued, as if reading my thoughts. "Men like you don't take charity. But you'd accept a deal. You'd fight for a win. So I made sure you had a hand worth playing." I sat down, feeling like the ground had shifted under me. "You rigged the game?" She shook her head sharply. "No, I gave you a seat. You play the hand. You won." The distinction mattered to her, and somewhere deep down, it mattered to me, too. But still, marriage? "So what now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "We put out a statement," she said. "We announce an engagement. You get access to every resource the Sterling Foundation can provide for Maya's surgery, without scandal, without pity. You'll be my fiancé on paper. A transaction. Until it isn't. That last part. Until it isn't. Sat between us like an unsaid truth neither of us was ready to examine. She wasn't offering a rescue. She was offering a partnership forged in shared grief and a strange, unexpected respect. I looked at the woman across from me, the most powerful person I'd ever met, and realized we were both standing on the same edge. Just two people trying to keep a promise to someone they'd lost. And in that moment, with the weight of everything unsaid hanging in the air, I took a breath and nodded. Deal. It's funny how a single poker hand turned into a life neither of us planned. What started as a wager, half joke, half lifeline, became something neither Victoria nor I could file away as business. The world called it a fake engagement, but there was nothing fake about the way she'd braided Maya's hair before doctor visits, or how Maya started calling her Aunt Vicky without needing permission. We kept up appearances for a while, photos, interviews, the usual corporate dance, but behind closed doors, life blurred into something more honest. Victoria wasn't the cold CO anymore. She was the woman who knew how to calm Maya's panic attacks. She was the person who sat with me through sleepless nights when the fear of losing my daughter threatened to pull me under. The truth is, we never discussed what came next. There was no grand confession of love, no orchestrated proposal. One morning, months after Maya's surgery, we were sitting at the kitchen table. Me, with my usual black coffee, her, stealing bites from Maya's cereal bowl, when she simply looked at me and said, "You know, this doesn't feel like a deal anymore." I didn't need to ask what she meant. We had crossed a line somewhere in between hospital corridors and quiet nights in the penthouse, when pretending stopped and something real took its place. We never threw a wedding. There were no guest lists, no headlines. It was just life, unfolding the way it should have if we hadn't both been so stubborn. Victoria once said she didn't believe in fate, that life was just a series of calculated moves. But standing there watching Maya sprint across the park, strong, healthy, fearless, I knew better. Some moves can't be calculated. Some bets are made with your heart long before the cards hit the table. In the end, Victoria Sterling didn't save me. I didn't save her. We saved each other, piece by piece, hand by hand, until what started as a gamble became a family.